Okay, we are recording. So, let me sharpen my pencil really quick. So we've been talking about heads and torso and pelvises in terms of cubes. Pardon the noise. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to use cubes as our sort of concept. And so we're going to do the same thing with faces. So let me pull up a face that I can look at. Where's that one face? Here we go. So, as you draw your cube, and again, I've mentioned a couple anatomical markers. We have the forehead. In this case, what I'm looking at is, I think you all have already drawn it. This guy's kind of got a receding hairline, but I really try to look for the frontal bone. It's kind of, you can feel the bump right here on your head. It's usually right below your headline, depending on your hairline where it is. So that's usually the top. And again, I'm drawing the cube and I'm rounding it out and I'm altering it a little bit so that, again, it looks a little bit more like a face. And again, this face that I'm looking at is sort of facing to the left a little bit, which means I am able to see the right. It's a little big. And so I kind of go from the frontal bone down to the chin. I round out the sides a little bit. And again, this face is sort of looking to the left. So if you're looking to the left, you can see the right side. And where this line is usually, and again, you will be able to see this in the video, but if you see a shadow kind of going down the forehead, down the temple, past sort of the side of the eye, down the cheekbone, and down sort of the side of the cheek, that's usually where that can be seen, if you're wondering where it is. And it's, the division between the front and back of the face, roughly. And again, I try to round things out a little bit. The other thing I tend to do, especially at this stage, is I'll just change the side and I'll start knocking in sort of the brain case in the back of the head a little bit. Again, I'm sort of taking some shortcuts. Can't see much of the side of this head, but I'm just going to exaggerate a little bit sort of to demonstrate my points here. So again, that's a roundish cube that's more looking like a head rather than a cube. Okay, so we have the frontal bone, we have the chin. Now, lots of artists really break down the face into, I would say, too many different sections. Like, they overcomplicate it a lot, a little bit too much. But it is helpful to, at the very least, find out the center axis of the face. And again, I tend to curve it. And again, since the face is pointed that way, the curve is pointed that way. And again, you kind of go from the center, you find sort of a line down the center of the forehead to the nose, down to the center of the chin, roughly. And again, I'm exaggerating a little bit to demonstrate my point. So, that's the center line, and it's a really good thing to find at first. Now, the other way I tend to divide up the face is the eyes, the bottom of the nose, and the mouth. The eyes are halfway down. I know that kind of sounds too far, but from the sort of the top of the forehead or the top of the head, depending on your point of view. Again, this guy's head, I can't really see much of the top. But if you measure from about halfway down, that's where the center axis of the eyes go. And again, I will curve that out. I'll do a curved cross contour to make, again, the face feel three-dimensional. And so the eyes should fall along this axis roughly. Got a little bit of chicken scratch going on here. That's not good. And again, it depends on what you're looking at, but really try to find these two divisions. So again, one of the cardinal sins of portraiture is not putting the eyes in the right place. Now, the very, 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 very first thing that we are able to recognize, the very first pattern that we recognize is the human face. It's the face of our parents, usually our mother, and that pattern of what a face looks like is like the very first thing. And it's a survival skill so that babies know who and what to trust, right? And not just to recognize who mom and dad is, but to recognize this pattern of what a human face looks like. And so if it's off, you're going to notice. And so again, it's sort of important to get these right. And in fact, I think I'm a little too high, at least on the sides. Because this line's going to come in handy. I think I'm about, that's what's wrong. That's a little bit off too. This is going to come in handy too when we're drawing like the ears and stuff as well, because all of these things tend to line up. And again, we're speaking in averages. We're speaking sort of at the middle, and you'll start to notice different human beings vary in different ways. So you'll start to notice, oh, this person's eyes are a little bit further apart than kind of the standard. I don't want to say the norm because nobody's really normal, but you'll start noticing that this is sort of an average. I think I'm a little bit off, but that's okay. So I divide that in half, and again, I carry that line around to the side. So I curve it around to the side of the head because, again, that's going to be important here in a second. So halfway is your eyes. Halfway between that and that, the middle point and the bottom is the bottom of your nose. It's about there. And then halfway, so that's a quarter. Halfway between that and that, so at the 8th mark is usually about where the mouth is. And so I will just usually do little tick marks where those are in terms of the whole face. Because you don't have to do the whole thing. And so as you start drawing in, you'll start noticing, all right, here's the bridge of the nose, kind of comes out. And you know where to stop it roughly. Now, a lot of art teachers will show you this. Once you get the eyes in, and again, I'll show you how to draw eyes, but you can kind of mark them in roughly. One measurement some artists do, and again, I tend not to pay attention to this because it just adds too much to the drawing. We've already got a lot going on here, is that the space in between the two eyes is one eye length. So if you measure the width of each eye, the space in between the two is about one eye length, roughly. And again, you'll start seeing variations on this. So that's about one eye. And then the mouth, usually the width of the mouth is right beneath the center of the eye. So that's a measurement that you can do too, again, to find where these things are. And then once you find that, then you can look at the individual you're drawing and say, okay, well, this person's mouth is a little bit smaller, it's a little bit wider, it's a little bit whatever. I tend not to do this because this looks like a clown or looks like the crow from that movie in the 90s. And it's just adding too much for me. Adding all these measurements can be helpful. So I encourage you to use them if you find them helpful. But doing all that stuff means I'm paying more attention to this and not what I'm looking at. Because what I'm looking at is the most important thing. I'm realizing my face is kind of wide too. Because really, as you mark in these measurements, you'll note that the person you're drawing does not fit these rules sometimes, more often than not. They don't necessarily fit this standard because, again, the standard's sort of in the middle of everyone. If we average everyone together, we're about there. But not everybody. And so you really need to observe your subject matter. So all I do is I'll just divide up into these measurements. Divide the face in half vertically, half horizontally. Find that midpoint, the quarter, and the eighth, and I'm done. Adding in all the other lines just is, for me, it's a distraction. Though, if you keep it in mind and not draw it, keep in mind, like, oh, where's the mouth? The mouth needs to be as wide as the center of the eyes. Keep that in mind. It's a good thing to have in your toolbox if that helps you out. Now, other measurements. You guys notice I continued the midpoint of my horizontal. I continued it all the way to the back of the face because that is where your eyes line up with the top of your ears. So the top of the ear is, again, right here, lines up with your eye. So I will divide the side in halves as well. So I'll sort of do a vertical and a horizontal line, and I usually draw these lightly. I'm drawing them very dark for your purposes, and this intersection is about where the ear is. And oftentimes the bottom of the ear will line up with the mouth. Depends on the human being you're drawing, though, because again, some people have big ears, some people have little ears, but generally speaking, the other part that is about halfway is what corresponds with the bottom of your ear. If you feel right here below your earlobe, what connects there? It's your jawline. So halfway, if you divide this in half, going vertically, that's where your jawline usually is. It meets your ear comes up here to this point, etc. And then you can start kind of erasing your cube a little bit. Again, when I draw a cube, I will skip straight to that part. So as I'm drawing ahead, instead of drawing a whole cube, I'll just skip straight to this, right? I'll draw sort of a skull instead. And so, again, that's just a shortcut I prefer. And then again, boom, halfway, halfway, halfway. So my gesture will look something like that. That's actually a better face than the one I drew. And then you can start, again, refining. And so curving the forehead. Usually you have eye socket, you have a cheekbone. Chin, some people's chins are round, some are square, some are... This guy at least has a very square, so I'll sort of use this as a reference. Some people's jawline are very angled, some are very round, some are covered in beards. All right, and so you can kind of start connecting the dots a little bit, using these measurements as your limitations here. So frontal bone comes into the brow, and you have your orbital where your eye is. And then again, you really need to observe each individual and how these shapes kind of play out. And you can start erasing stuff as you can figure stuff out. And again, using the cube really helps us understand where the values lie too, because let's pretend the light is in front of, and so that's your breaking point for shadows, usually is where you have the cube drawn. And you can sort of start refining this based on what you're looking at. And then, let's just pretend this person has hair, etc. One thing I'll mention at this point while I'm thinking about this, the one other cardinal sin that a lot of students do, a lot of artists do starting out, is they don't make the brain case big enough. In fact, I probably didn't make this big enough. If I'm going to be honest, I might exaggerate it just a bit. Now, if someone has hair, again, you might not be able to see the brain case, but so many people will stop here at the frontal bone and go straight across. And eliminate the one thing that really makes us human, is our big old brains. And so keep that in mind as you're doing this. If someone has hair, again, it's going to be tough to see, and again, everybody's hairline is a little bit different maybe, right? Like this guy just sort of has kind of a funky hairdo and a receding hairline. So his hairline's above his frontal bone. So I could take that measurement and just move this maybe back a little bit. This guy's kind of has a interesting hairdo. And I'm just drawing the hair as sort of a shape, right? But once you have this foundation, you can start kind of just tacking in and really, again, looking at, like this guy has sort of really narrow eyes. That's sort of a interesting, some people have like a lot of fat right here underneath their brow. So there's that shape, and then that's what this guy's eye kind of looks like. Sorta. But hopefully this looks a little bit alien, to be honest, but I think once I add more detail, it'll kind of clarify itself. Right? So those are the measurements of the face. Look up any artist on the internet and the YouTube, and they might have slightly different variations on this. Trying to make this look a little bit less alien. Give him a little smiley face. Anyways, other artists will have different measurements, like the mouth coming to below the eye, the face being 3 eyes across, as in there's one eye in between the two. Keep those in mind. Use them if they're useful. Look up other artists and see, like, okay, what does this artist do? How do they measure? Because that could end up being helpful. For me, it's just a distraction from what you really should be doing, which is looking at the face, because all of these rules, once they start being broken, that's when you start getting into, okay, well, this person's eyes are a little bit further apart, and that's what makes this person look like this person. And this, something like that. Again, I can just keep refining and refining and refining and refining. But as long as my bones are set up correctly, that I have a cube, that I have a 3-dimensional face with a front, side, top, or bottom, which helps me line up, okay, where's the frontal bone? Well, it goes along the side of the cube. Where's this? Well, where are the eyes? Well, I divide the front of my cube in half. I divide the bottom into a half, and then I divide it in a quarter and eighth to find the nose and mouth. Once you know roughly where they are, then look at your subject and find those little variations and things that make your subject them, right? Like, do they have a strong bridge, or is it just sort of a Roman nose? The Roman nose where they don't have much of a bridge. Like, I don't have much of a bridge, but some people have deep bridges. Some people have bigger noses, smaller noses, wider noses, flatter noses. Any questions as to that? Okay, I will stop this recording.